So my name is Hannah Bowlus. I'm in my 5th year at Bowling Green State University, and I'm going into my thesis year. So I've been in Glass about 4 years now. So I took my first class in 2019, and here we are today. So today I'm just going to kind of go through some of the body of work that I've been interested in over the past couple years and some of the things that I've been thinking about. So welcome to my hole of crazy that I have been in for the past couple years, so we can go through this together. It'll be great. So this is, I'm sorry, okay, we'll just leave it. So this is an older body of work. This is from 2021. But I think it was important at least to start with this because it starts to touch on a lot of topics that, I guess, visual topics that I start to think about in a lot of my later work. So these first couple pieces, I really started to think about working in series, working with like concept iteration. So started with my first design and not necessarily coming up with something totally different for the next one, just moving with what I learned, moving with the same shapes and aesthetic and creating something that can exist in the same space together. Also starting to, create my, floating sketch of shapes on the page and start to figure out how those actually exist in the real world and can be an actual functional light. So all these pieces are functional lighting pieces, and they all have the rules where the bulb has to be changed and they have to be easily turned on and off. Also figuring out some hardware that I didn't really have to fabricate at the time because they weren't really skills in my toolbox. So this is just a spray painted PVC pipe. So that's kind of where I started. This piece, same kind of idea, layering, kind of experimenting with light and color and opacity and learning some more lamp hardware parts. This piece was a big one to kind of start figuring out how I wanted actual engineering systems to work inside of the light themselves. Like how is this gonna hang? How is this gonna exist? How are all these pieces gonna fit together? Blowing with calipers and matching diameters of existing hardware. Because at this point I wasn't fabricating anything myself. And without the chain, it would have totally fallen apart. So not really a successful piece, but I learned, a lot. Also part of the same series, working with modularity, being able to actually take it apart, rearrange it, actually play with the piece, kind of like an interactable element to these glass pieces. What does that look like for lighting? So a lot of early investigations. So this kind of carried forward to the next semester, and with these couple pieces, I had to get into fabricating my own hardware. It wasn't working anymore, so I had to learn a lot of steel working. I started using some 3D printing technologies. I used Fusion 360 to model the original shapes and then create plaster molds off of those to start working with more crisp, clean shapes that I'm not able to get in the hot shop at this time, maybe even after years of form blowing. But there's some behind the scenes. So there's the mold, and these guys are 22 inches tall, so working with scale as well. You can see it started with a lot more, so the process of moving through just how am I going to put this all together without it breaking. Obviously we only got 2 out of that. And then there are those components that are actually hidden inside of the final piece. Those are the bases there you can see in the bottom. So that bottom corner kind of shows those CNC'd pieces, and that's the element that allows the bulb to come out of the bottom, so you can actually change it for the piece. So then, continuing in this body of work into the next semester, these pieces were a complete study in modularity as well as form and color, specifically opal white. So I just love this color. I think it was really interesting for lighting design because when the light's off, perfectly white, looks pretty opaque. But as soon as the light comes on, it picks up any color that's being transferred from a colored glass underneath. So across these 3 pieces, the base and the 3 shades are all the same, and the colored cones on the inside all lift off of the base, and you can change them out. So this kind of shows that process of being able to lift the shades off, as well as the kind of hardware design that goes into that that piece itself. So all the cones have those like bolts on there that actually hold the shades on it. So that was a really, I think, informative study, just like looking at how something like this would work on a industrial scale in someone's house. Like when you have like a fragile glass piece, like how much can you actually move it around and work with it? So investigating some more like actual usable functional glass sculptural lighting pieces in your house. So this is not only a light, it's also a fish tank, or you could grow plants in it. So just in kind of continuing working on these ideas. This one was, I feel like, a full-blown, just like how far can I push like sculptural lighting. I've been thinking about light for a long time, not only in like a scientific sense, like, you know, as an organism that exists and has to live in light, but also as an artist. You know, we work in a medium that has the capability to partner with light in ways that we don't really see across a lot of other mediums. It's pretty unique, the things that we can do. So like actually building like super sculptural pieces that are built to showcase those qualities of that interaction between the light and the glass. So this one was fully fabricated steel, and like a system inside where it all lifts apart with magnets so that you can change the bulb on the inside if you need to, or easy storage or anything like that. So moving in the next semester, still obsessed with light. This piece though, I was like, okay, like I'm not getting these like sharp lines, these crisp shapes that, you know, I'm really like striving for in the hot shop. So after learning about lost wax casting in my intro class, I kind of circled back around to casting, something I hadn't really done for a while. And I did a bunch of research on lost PLA casting. So basically you can go straight from your, I'll flip back to this one in a second. So Fusion 360 3D model to 3D printed shape, and you can take it straight off the bed, cover it in plaster. I used R&R 910, so it was like a really robust, like mold material. It kept all of the edges like pretty crisp with minimal chipping on like these sharp cubic edges. And these were all, since they were 3D printed, everything fit perfectly together and was super mathematical and exact. So the actual form had like a cube that was 50% smaller than the actual form cut out of a corner. So there is an inner cube space created by all those cutout corners where there is a blown cube on the inside, and that's where the actual bulb is held in that. And I have a little video here. Hopefully it'll play. Oh, okay, sorry.
You can go to the next slide.
Okay. Uh-oh.
I'll do this right here. Let's see. It's so disorienting doing it from this angle.
No, you're fine.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Also do this. This full screen.
Well, I'm sorry the video couldn't play for the last one, but it was also kind of a study in working with some like dichromatic casting glass. So by putting different like bulbs on the inside, it shifts to different colors. I wish you could see the video. It's so cool. So like the video starts with that piece that was like bright gold in that previous picture. So it's gold under LED light. So that's like the bulb I had in. But if you were to put under this light here, which I think is fluorescent, it's a bright green. So it's so striking when you flip that switch and it shifts from green to that gold. So that was like a really cool study as well. And like working with that kind of stuff like in lighting, playing with that part of light as well with the glass material, which was a really fun project. Also, the lost PLA casting is a really cool thing that I would like to do more of in the future. I think it is very interesting from like a position of like could actually make like glass components, like the same way that you're making like mechanical structures and these things. You could make like these glass like nuts and bolts and stuff that all fit together. So like, I don't know what that looks like. And now we have glass 3D printers. So I don't even know if we'll need that in the future, but like now that I come to think of it, but that was a really cool process to work with. So this is my most recent work from last semester. So this came from, again, from the video. You're able to see that inner blown cube as you like rotate to the side of the piece, of the last cast glass piece. But I had to make a steel mold for that, like a steel cube mold. So after I was like practicing with this mold to make all these pieces, I had all these glass cubes lined up like on the cold chop table, ready to grind. And I was like thinking about pixels and grids and kind of this like idea that I've been working around for a long time, which was using the actual glass in these sculptures as a medium to create a light sculpture, which is something, again, that I really feel like can only happen really well with glass as a medium. So I'm like, all right, so basically all of this, I just want to make a giant glass screen that I can play Tetris on. So I pulled it together in about like 2 months probably. I was like, I know that I can make all the glass. So this is, but I'm not able to do the coding. Very minimal coding, like intro to Python level. So I did some collaboration with some of my friends who are computer programmers. They coded it all in C. So this is a LED, like a modular LED matrix panel system. So on each panel in the image on the right, there are 25 LEDs in the matrix, and then 25 little cleats that the actual like blown cube can clip on over the LED. And then the panels themselves, there's 10 of them. So it's arranged in this way, like a classic like Tetris or retro game format, but they could be really any format that you want on the wall, which is really exciting. I'm excited to play around with it more. But so in the middle, that's the final Tetris. I don't know if the next video will play of stuff running and everything, but the one on the right is a recent actually like installation of this piece I was able to do outside of the crit room. So Bowling Green is 30 minutes south of Toledo, Ohio. So if you're familiar with that area at all, well, we should all be familiar with Toledo, Ohio, actually. Right, okay, like Glass City. But yeah, so they have like a really awesome community festival called Momentum. So I was able to enter this piece there and actually get like people playing it, which was awesome. So this next video, hopefully get to kind of talk over it as it plays. So this will kind of, hopefully like show some scale and the actual like workability of it. But like this piece was so exciting for me because I hadn't really been collaborating much in my process at all. So really like seeing the power of having this group of people doing what they're good at in all of these different areas and pulling that all together was like a really successful experience for me in this, and working on this scale, working with some, yeah, that was so sad. Yeah, so for this show, we had Stacker on the screen instead of Tetris, so you can like plug in any code that you want to it. It doesn't have to be a game. It can just be like a light show, be whatever you want. But like, honestly, I'm just looking for more people to collaborate with who would have some good ideas for this. So, but yeah, so that's kind of what's been going on. I appreciate your time, and I guess to kind of wrap up my thoughts so it doesn't end on a crazy note is this is all culminating in me graduating next semester, and with this final piece and the collaboration that went into it, I'm starting to realize like how important this network of people is around me, and already meeting people where it's like, if this stuff wants to happen, like, you know, have people that fabricate, have people that know how to put this all together. And I feel like it's kind of all starting to come full circle, where I've appreciated my time so much in school, and I'm just really ready to see, like, I would love to continue with this body of work and kind of what's been going on with it. But yeah, I've honestly just been having so much fun. So, like, doing this stuff, it's been having fun. So thanks for listening. I appreciate it. And we're exactly at 15 minutes. So I guess we'll turn it over. So.
We have about 5 minutes for questions. If anyone has any comments, or questions or comments, sorry. I can definitely start as somebody with more of a design background. It's very cool to have a speaker who's coming to the glass process thinking about form. sketching process, since you're somebody who's working in a lot more advanced 3D modeling, or you're sort of dealing with this idea of constructing these really elaborate 3D forms. So I was curious how you go about thinking through making these pieces.
Yeah, the sketching is crazy. Thank you for the question. I feel one of the rules that I've kind of had for the past couple years have been just starting with like simple shapes and starting there. I feel like my ultimate goal is like creating these pieces that are very well balanced and like what our eyes find pleasing. Like we talk about like the golden ratio and these like rectangles and circles and all these curves that exist like super mathematically. So in my sketchbook, it'll basically just be like all these simple shapes like cube, circle, oval, like and like what if we just like stretch that circle a little bit and just like overlapping lines of these shapes until like this pleasing form starts to come out of that. And then once it moves from the sketching to like, okay, so here's all these floating 2D shapes. So like how are these going to be sliced up and exist where they're not floating, and then what's the structure? So then I'll like zoom into each part of those sketches and be like, there has to be a connection here, or like this has to rest on something, so this has to be screwed. So like, what is that going to look like? And that'll change the design as well, but ultimately like trying to keep those values. But yeah.
For the last PLA casting, do you find PLA affects the mold material in any way, or did you have to experiment a lot in that regard?
Oh yeah, so tell me if I heard it wrong, but you're asking if in the lost PLA casting, if I found that it like affected the material in any way, or like that process affected it, like affected the mold making and stuff like that, like cracking. Yeah, so I found with the like a standard plaster silica mold, it expands ever so slightly in the mold, just enough to crack it. So like I played around a little bit, but there are some amazing resources and like published studies that people have done where they've gone through everything using different types of filament and stuff like that, even resin. But the PLA is the best one. So it already had minimal flashing and cracking in the mold. But I found that the R&R 910 investment was like the strongest. There was very little cracking. I didn't need to do multiple layers. I just did one pour, like all around the piece, and it didn't have to be like layered or anything like that. But yeah, I found that it definitely involves some testing. Also, my piece was pretty thin, but it's also pretty delicate. So I haven't really done much more past like what you saw, but that's all I can share from my experience with that. Yeah, it was great. Also, it smells terrible. So like I had to like start, it's like, okay, if I start at like the program at like noon on this day, like it's gonna be burning out at 2 a.m. So like everyone should be gone. So this is not really, but it's like, it's corn based. So even though like it's like smells terrible, it's not as toxic as other ones. So like if you were to do this, I'd recommend make sure your ventilation's working, maybe do your first one at night. And if, maybe I don't recommend it. Maybe I don't recommend it. But like, I don't know. I a lot of people have been doing it, so it's okay. Just don't open the kiln and put your head in like right after. Like, just like air out a little bit.
They also make like a PLA alternative for casting that is supposed to be more wax-based.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also know people doing PVA.
Yeah.
Which is like almost like a glue and then steaming it out. So there's lots of people doing lots of things.
Lots of options, yeah.
Lots of resources.
This is the water soluble stuff though, right?
No,
You don't burn out the entire mass of stuff, do you?
I think you're burning it out, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you basically like send it up pretty slow, where the majority of it actually does melt out, and then you like kick it up to 700 for like the last like little bit of time, and that burns out any residue. But you have to use clear. If you use certain colors, the powder color will be left and stain your glass. That's one thing that I found.
Is there a water soluble one? I've seen.
Yeah, that's the PVA, and then there's also one that they use for like supports in 3D printing that I know people have used, but I think that one gets weird when you put plaster on it.
Yeah. More experiments to be done. I don't have all the answers, but thank you guys. Appreciate it.